Hey, how's it going everyone? We're going to be talking about some very interesting concept artwork for Alien Covenant. Now it has been quite a while since I've talked about this film, and that's just because there really hasn't been anything to discuss in detail or any kind of theories or anything like that. Everything had pretty much been covered, but now we actually have some very cool concept art that has surfaced from the very early scripts of the film, back when the idea was to do much more of a direct Prometheus sequel. So thanks to the guys over at AVP Galaxy for actually discovering and stumbling across this guy's stuff. This comes to us from artist Kang Lee, who does a lot of different conceptual artwork and graphic design work for a bunch of films when they're in production. So based off the artwork alone, we can tell that this was going to be a completely different film than what we actually saw in Alien Covenant. Since this was all drafted back in 2014, it's likely after the very first screenplay was finished, when they still were calling the film Paradise Lost or whatever have you, and it looks like there are a lot of elements that are similar to Covenant, with the fact that, David being this sort of Dr. Moreau figure and experimenting on the black goo and creating eggs and things like that. The creatures that we see in the concept art looks very different than the final film. There's no completed xenomorph like what we know and love, there's no neomorphs or anything, but there are white translucent colored aliens though in this concept art, and for some reason they're labeled xenomorph in the conceptual file names, which is interesting. Another thing that's very different about this artwork is that it actually shows off a Giger-esque engineer homeworld, which would have been, I think, a welcome addition to the film. A lot of people were wondering why the engineer's home planet didn't have this sort of Giger architecture and design to it when all of their ships and vehicles had it. And that's something that stuck out to me, even though I did like the planet and location they used in the finished product of Paradise, and it was like a grassy, lush environment with a kind of Roman architecture. I did like that locale, but at the same time I think having this sort of biomechanical Giger-esque landscape would have been very cool to explore on film. And of course, one of the very big takeaways from this artwork is that the engineers would have been heavily featured in the film, it looks like, and it also seems that the engineers themselves were going to be transformed into the xenomorph creatures, that they were going to actually be deconstructed and broken down by the black liquid that David spreads across the planet, and they would have actually transformed and mutated themselves into the white translucent aliens. One other point of interest is how there are other human characters on the planet with David, but they're all cocooned in some sort of like a hive-like wall structure. It looks very creepy, but also very much taken out of a Necronom painting or something. So I do like the imagery here, and it just goes to show how kind of crazy and messed up David had gotten. So all in all, I really do love this concept art, and it makes me wonder just what could have been in the very early development stages when it was going to be a pretty straightforward Prometheus sequel featuring the engineers, David, potentially Shaw, even though we don't get a clear shot of what she would be like in this concept art, but everything else looks really cool, and I wish we would have gotten this movie. But drop your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you guys think of the artwork? Do you think that it's better or worse than the final product? And what do you think is the coolest aspect of all this artwork? Personally, I think probably the Giger home planet and the fact that the engineers were going to play a larger part in the story. But that's all we have for this video. Like I said, drop all your thoughts down in the usual spot, and for more updates on everything in the Alien and Predator universe, be sure to subscribe to Hybrid Network.